Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're going to get started. I know there's people still trickling in, but that's okay. They are welcome to come whenever they are ready. But I do want to welcome everybody for being here. Thank you for taking the time. We are very excited here at the AMA Phoenix to be welcoming Pamela Slim to our webinar series. Just real quick announcements so we can get started. We want to save a lot of time for the presentation. We want to thank our sponsors. Again, our sponsors, I won't read them all out. You can see them. I do want to point out Taylor Wellman, who is our host. From Financial Potion. If you have any video needs, please consider giving Taylor a call. And she has been really a wonderful partner with us since the start of our webinar series, and we thank her. And I also would like to thank Eileen Burrick from Burrick Communication Design. I think she's on the line as well, or will be shortly. And she is our graphic design sponsor. So everything you see on this screen is usually from Eileen. And we also would like to thank our supporters. These are the companies that employ our board members. And our board members really put a lot of time and effort into this organization, and they wouldn't be able to without the support of their companies. So we do thank them. And I would like to just get into, and I'm going to keep this short and sweet because Pamela can tell us a little bit about herself, but we are thrilled to have Pamela Slim with us. She is an author, community builder, consultant, and former corporate director of training and development at Barclays Global Investors. She has spent a lot of time creating and developing training programs for large companies that we've all heard of before, such as HP, Charles Schwab, 3Com, Chevron, and Cisco Systems. Since 2005, Pam has advised thousands of entrepreneurs as well as companies serving the small business market, like Infusionsoft, Progressive Insurance, Constant Contact, and Prezi. And Pam is best known for her book, Escape from Cubicle Nation, and also her follow-up book, Body of Work. She does have an upcoming book, so take note, The Widest Net, which will be published in October 2021. So I would like to introduce Pam. She is the co-founder of Main Street Learning Lab in Mesa, Arizona. Pam, welcome. We are thrilled to have you, and we are really looking forward to your presentation.
Well, I am exceptionally excited to be here, and what a wonderful group of folks, some of whom I know as friends and clients and colleagues. I just learned Christy and I both worked at Barclays Global Investors. So our ecosystem connections are beginning already. And one of my favorite things that I'd love to do, even when we're connecting here in the webinar, which I know is probably one of the purposes that you have for the American Management Association, is to find those connections, find ways in which we can be supporting each other. And I love, even as people are introducing themselves in the chat, to begin to think about what are ways in which we can really stay connected. So I'm really delighted to be here, and thanks for having me. The path, I wanted to give context. You heard my bio. So I did spend a lot of years in corporate, 10 years as a management consultant, working on the human side of business, inside companies, primarily in Silicon Valley, which is, I'm from the Bay Area originally, and I moved here to Arizona about 17 years ago. But really since 2005, when I started my Escape from Cubicle Nation blog, which then ended up leading to a series of books, the heart of the work that I do is really with small business owners as the main customer base. And as I described, was described in my bio, that as part of that ecosystem connection, knowing that there are many companies that work with small business owners, that's the context in which I'll be working with them often, is advising them about the behavior and the needs and everything of small business owners. But I know I'm so excited because people on this call come from so many different places, many of you with huge background and advanced degrees in marketing and many, many years just specifically working in marketing. My origins of the work really that has led to a passion for marketing really comes more from community building, because my degree in college was international service and development, like looking at education as a tool for social and economic change. So here, I don't know, 30 something years later, it's really fun to see how these threads are coming together, as it probably is for many of you. So a lot of the research and some of you're getting the inside of the laboratory. I'm literally here at the Main Street Learning Lab in downtown Mesa, Arizona, which is a small business learning lab. I'm right in the middle of writing my next book, The Widest Net, for McGraw-Hill. And so I really wanted to be sharing with you and engaging in some conversation about a core of the work and some of the frameworks that I've been implementing with clients. The way that often I'm led in developing my work at Escape from Cubicle Nation, of course, it was for people who felt like they were not a good fit for corporate, just helping them to leave and really land in entrepreneurship squarely on their feet, where they could still take care of themselves and their family. After doing that for a number of years, I noticed that people would have that point of view that the only way you could be cool and creative is if you work for yourself. And I find that not to be true, and also to be very insulting for wonderful people who may work for a large corporation or work for a university or a government or a nonprofit. There are people doing amazing work everywhere. And so that led me to want to create a framework for the way that we look at the world of work that used a metaphor that would help people, maybe some of yourselves, who are going to be moving among and through different work modes. And that was body of work. Because I'm curious, and some of you could say in the chat, if some of you may have worked for a large company and then gone off and worked for yourself. And then you might find that at a certain stage of your life, you might want to go back and join a smaller firm or work for a nonprofit. Or what a lot of people might do these days is to have one job and then have a side hustle doing something else. So the way that I like to think about it is that is your body of work that you create. Everything you create, contribute, affect, and impact throughout the course of your life is your body of work. And just being conscious about what you want to create from today forward in this next phase of your body of work is really important, so that you make sure that your skills and your strengths and your interests are really aligned to build things that are really relevant for you. So maybe the context as we have this discussion today is to be thinking about, now that we're in mid-November, thankfully rounding the corner on 2020, that's been quite the year. Really think about what is that work that you are excited to bring forth into the world. In your role, it could be in your role inside a large company. Many of you, I was seeing somebody, Mark, jumping into the wealth advisor space. So it sounds like maybe you're beginning to emerge into a new part of your work, or you're really wanting to grow in a new area. Think about that as you're listening to what I'm talking about today, to anchor the kind of audience that you really want to be building for that work, because that's really at the heart of eventually in next October, which will be a completed book with The Widest Net, is a very specific way that I found over the last 30 years of really building a solid community. And of course, along the way as business owners, also building a really strong business where you have very engaged clients, where you have wonderful peers and peer mentors that support you in the work. You have partners that you work with, and collectively that we can work together to build something really meaningful. So that's just so you know the context of where my work comes from. And everything that I've learned and everything that I apply in the model is based on real work that I've done in the real world with real entrepreneurs. I think it's the thing that keeps me the most honest, because when somebody has to take their hard-earned money and invest it in coaching, as my sales mentor, Skip Miller, used to say, when people give you money, they want it back, right? So anything they're investing, we want to make sure that we're returning it. So that's really where it comes from. So what we're going to talk about today is a concept I call watering holes that is part of an ecosystem. And I'm excited to hear that some of you are using ecosystem. I see it in many different spaces now, especially in software as a service space, in downtown economic development, like we're doing here in downtown Mesa. But specifically in my context of thinking about it from a framework of marketing, really looking at where are places in person and online where you can find lots of ideal clients that fit your your idea of an ideal client profile. Looking about how to identify and build partnerships. And I definitely have a point of view about the fact that building partnerships is a human process, that there are exciting and wonderful things that I actually love and I geek out about around marketing, online marketing and SEO and all these things where we can automate and we can use technology to help us. I love all of that. I find it very exciting. At the same time, when I look at my own history of the work that I've done over 30 plus years, it really is based in long-term relationships with real human people and nurturing those relationships, finding ways that we can really build a connection with each other that's enduring over time, and to make good choices about partnerships. And maybe some of you have had not so good of a partnership. I call it the let's put on a show phenomena, where you might run into each other at a conference. You're like, oh, wow, you're cool. I'm cool. Let's put on a show. Like those 1940s movies where everybody meets and then they're dancing down the street. Sometimes what happens when you don't use a lot of discernment in your partnership building is you end up getting partway into that partnership and saying, oh my goodness, this was not the good choice of a person. I should have done more due diligence. Maybe we're not really a fit for each other. So there's a little bit of the slow food movement, if you will, within my ecosystem model. Sometimes in marketing, we're all about building big and building fast. And I love building, I love growth, but I also really believe in sustainability. We'll look at some of the key components of the ecosystem model, and then just a really more of a concept. Sammy, who's joining us today, I just finished this week my Tiny Marketing Actions class. This is more of really a specific behavioral component of the ecosystem model, which is really about taking small little steps in order to plant seeds and build connections. Before everybody joined us, we were talking about our love for Peloton. And I don't know if anybody else is a Peloton fan. I got mine in July and I love it. One of the things I love so much about it is it's a perfect example of a very well-designed tool that helps us to take daily actions in a sustainable way that lead to big progress over time. That, you know, none of us can immediately just get in shape instantly, that it's going to take that commitment over time to the tiny action. So that's a big part of the model. And then just really as a lens for you to think about, knowing that all of you are at different stages in your career, and you might be thinking about what your goals are for the next year. Anything that we're talking about in terms of building partnerships within the ecosystem for your business also applies to your own career. What are ways that you might think about other kinds of organizations, other partners, other places that you could work to maybe shift your career? Because I know that that's often something that we're thinking about in addition to just moving forward with our current thing. So I'm not sure how many of you are familiar and know Susan Beyer, who is from Audience Audit. She is one of my very best friends in the world. I feel like she's an Arizona national treasure. If she has not done a webinar yet for you, you should, because she's extremely entertaining and very, very smart. And I have worked with her directly for the last 5 years. I've worked with her specifically with a lot of my client projects, and she'll be a key subject matter expert for the chapter of my book. But really, she has completely revolutionized the way that I think about marketing. And really the essential part at first of this ecosystem design model is in leaving aside at first this idea that we market to demographics. That when people say, well, which is often a question that I might ask to my clients, so tell me about who are your ideal clients? And they'll say, well, I've done a lot of research and thinking, and I've narrowed it down to women. Okay, could we get a little more specific than that? Susan often jokes about this, but if you want to sell a car, you can't just market to women age 25 to 55. We've just been through this huge national election. How interesting is it to see that often people that might come from what looks like the very same demographic can have really different needs, wants, desires, values, and behaviors. So the demographics can be something, if it is important to us in our business, to be engaging. I know here at the Main Street Learning Lab, one of our main focus areas is in working with entrepreneurs of color. My husband is Navajo, and so it's a really important thing that we want to do here is to really highlight the leadership that exists within those communities. But it's really that we add as a component after we dig in and really do more of an attitudinal segmentation. So let me give you a concrete example. Here is Susan, always with great t-shirts. Who's your data? And this was a attitudinal segmentation study that she did for Infusionsoft, aka Keep, where I'm actually speaking tomorrow. They have their user conference tomorrow. And so she did an attitudinal segmentation survey. Is it fair to assume that all of you know what that is? If not, you can, I'll give you a few details here. And I will also upload this report that she and Infusionsoft created as the result of the segmentation. But basically, it's really doing surveys directly with customers, in this case of the Infusionsoft brand, to really figure out what were the motivations and the attitudes of their different users. And when she goes into a survey, she always says she doesn't know which attitudinal segments are going to shake out. It's based on seeing what the results say that then she can cluster these different types of folks into, in this case, 4 different areas. And so just to give you a little easier graphic to look at, for Infusionsoft's customers, and now they're local Chandler-based software company that makes software for marketing automation for the small business market, we could see where, in general, we could make assumptions about why it is that those customers are purchasing that tool or that software. When they did the survey, they came back with these 4 just about equally balanced audience segments that really had very, very different motivations for why they were purchasing and using the software. So the passionate creators love to work, get up early, are passionate about creating, often prefer to be working directly one-on-one with their clients. They're really consumed and love their work and are very connected with their communities. Freedom seekers probably read 4-Hour Workweek back in the day, are super excited about how to just shave as much time possible off of working so that they can continue to see those dollars roll into their bank accounts, right? Who doesn't want that? Passive revenue while you're sipping margaritas on a beach somewhere. And so for these folks, the appeal of this product is really around wanting independence and flexibility, working from anywhere, passive revenue. You can see even within these 2 segments where it's really pretty opposed, to each other. Legacy builders tended to be folks who really got into business for working with a family. They might want to build a very substantial, operationally sound, ethical business that they could pass on to the next generation within their family. And so from their perspective, they often didn't have, let's say compared to the freedom seekers, so many different types of businesses or different projects or products. They were really looking at building just a solid company that would endure over time. And the survivors were those that were determined to succeed, but it was kind of difficult. They're like, depending on the day, they're not quite sure why they chose to do this wild entrepreneurship thing. And so they live with a little bit more, anxiety about it. So just looking at this as an example of, as you are thinking about how it is that you build your audience, when you do it from an audience perspective based on a problem or challenge that they have that they're trying to solve, you really would have very different marketing messages for each of these different segments. For me, I consider myself a passionate creator. I love to write, I love to create, I love to work with my clients. And so when somebody says, hey, you could just not work at all, I'm thinking, well, what would I do? I've already gotten to the end of Netflix through the quarantine, so I can't do that anymore, right? I love, why would I be working if I'm not doing things to passionately create? And the people who I follow online, the types of books I read, the podcasts I listen to could be very, very different than each of these different market segments. So fundamentally, when we start to talk about ecosystem design in the context of a business, it's recognizing, like all of you expert professional marketers know, that it's not always just going to be that one market segment. But what gets a little bit more complex with it is that you probably are going to be defining some very different types of events, influencers, places to hang out in order to reach your preferred audience segments within your business. So just examples of digging into to begin to define the audience by problem as the first step to then analyzing the ecosystem in which they live is really getting your hands around that problem or challenge they have. So for somebody who might be a landscaper, they would help homeowners who want to showcase a beautiful yard while maintaining value in their home, but who don't have time to do yard work themselves. So the focus there is really on the reason why that homeowner is hiring them, not just because they're just any type of landscaping service. For a consultant, they might help organizations save money by identifying how they can automate their most repetitive tasks. So that lens that a consultant is coming in with is about streamlining and operational efficiencies, which we'll see how that relates to ecosystem in just a second. And then for a jewelry maker, very often I work with a lot of artists, especially here downtown. And sometimes people say, well, what's that value proposition behind jewelry or art? What is you can't get a direct return on investment like you might get if you're investing with a consultant of getting your money back. But as many of you know, that there's very specific reasons why somebody might invest. Specific jewelry can make people feel a certain way. It can, help to convey a unique and bold sense of style. It can be something that helps them to communicate power. I remember I had this really beautiful large silver bracelet for many years that I would wear every time I had to step on a big stage to do a big presentation. I would put on my bracelet and I felt like the Xena warrior princess. Like it had a very specific purpose that just, as soon as I put it on, I felt like I was putting on that armor. So you could say, oh, it's just beautiful, it's just jewelry. But in that context, if you're to look at really some of the underlying reasons why it is that people are buying things, then we can begin to see what else they might be interested in. So in this ecosystem model, a specific ideal client, a specific audience, if we just think about that Infusionsoft example I gave a little bit before, this would be a case where maybe we just chose one of those 4 audience segments, let's say the passionate creator, and we put that person in the middle of the ecosystem. So this is a really important concept. Very often when we talk about ecosystems, we're really just kind of saying, how can I just get as many people as possible to come to buy my stuff, or to like my things, or to get more Instagram followers? It's perfectly fine. It's part of marketing. I call it more of that empire rather than ecosystem. So in an empire, it's really just about attracting attention and where you really see yourself as being in the center of the ecosystem. In this ecosystem design, it really is your ideal client who is in the middle. And in order for them to solve their particular problem, in order for this passionate, creative person to have a viable, thriving, growing business, yes, they might need software. They might need the technology of Infusionsoft in order to automate their marketing. But they're also going to need a whole bunch of other things, right? They might need a business coach. They might need a lawyer. They probably need a CPA or an accountant. They might participate in events like we're going to have here next week, Global Entrepreneurship Week in Arizona, where we have events all throughout the city where they might learn from fellow entrepreneurs and see things that are happening here locally. They probably listen to podcasts. They watch YouTube channels. They read books. Once we're able to actually meet together in person, hopefully next year, by next summer, they go to specific events and conferences. And so if you visualize yourself for a moment wherever you might fit. You know, right now we might see the American Marketing Association. So business owners, like many of you on the call, this is part of your ecosystem where you're coming in order to learn something specific to help you grow your business as part of this association. And this association is local, but of course we know it's part of this larger national organization, and then there are global organizations. So when you begin to look at it that way, first, and you can look at it just for your own goals that you have for what it is that you want to build in this coming year, where might be some other parts of the ecosystem wheel where you can see that there might be some watering holes. There would be places for you to find great amounts of ideal clients that have already been gathered and organized by one of these ecosystem partners on the wheel. This is a process, again, when you start to look at it really specifically, that can take some time and some organization to begin to track it. But the key, when you are part of this ecosystem who is really aligned together in order to make sure that this ideal client is successful as a small business owner, this is where then you can see part of your job, of course, is to deliver excellent service, to do your role, your specific part in that ecosystem. So when people are hiring me as a business coach, then it's my job to show up fully for the work that I'm doing for them. But it's also my job to make sure that I'm introducing them to a lot of other players in the ecosystem that could help. I know here in Mesa, because of COVID here downtown, so much was happening with businesses that were impacted by COVID that there was a lot of coordination that we did with clients in connecting with government resources, right? We have Mesa Cares program. Some of you across the valley probably have similar things. So there was a lot of connection and coordination to make sure that people were aware of resources that were happening. We were sharing and connecting, on different social channels. So the idea, as you really begin to get pretty precise over time with your ideal clients, is just to learn as much as you possibly can about these places where they do hang out in person and online. What are their very favorite resources? Who are their most trusted advisors? And of all the kinds of watering holes to me that can be the most effective, I think events are really the most meta of anything. How many of you went to South by Southwest in the past? Any South by Southwesters? I used to go every single year without fail. It's an example of something where you have every single part of that ecosystem that's there in one physical location. And in particular, there was the Bloggers Lounge, which I always used to go to, where there would be potential clients, there were sponsors there that would often be sponsoring an event. There were all kinds of influencers that you could just sit down and you could talk to, right, and make a connection with. It's just literally a mini, absolutely curated kind of ecosystem that you have within an event in a conference. So even when we have virtual conferences, there's ways we can begin to go in and diagnose and begin to understand where are some of these places where you have the biggest bang for the buck. And it goes without saying, each of us has different values. We have ethical principles. We have a different kind of style and approach, a point of view to our business. So it's not everybody who does this work. When you're really crafting that ecosystem to support, I call them my beloved clients. I have a few of them here on the call today that, I care about them. I really do not want to promote a product that I don't believe in. I don't want to refer them to a CPA who's going to do a terrible job and get them in trouble with the IRS, right? That when we're really cultivating that ecosystem, it is the best possible resources to allow them to completely solve their problem. So that's some of the testing and trying that you can do as you start to work through that system. So this is the context in terms of what the ecosystem is. Watering holes, as the visual clearly conveys, can be these places where you just have great amounts of people that are connected. And the beautiful thing is they can be organized by someone else. It can be beautiful when somebody has gone through the hard work of reaching out and getting people to like a page, all the marketing that all of you did for this webinar today. I'm so thankful, because then I get to meet a lot of you that I don't know before who are already assembled, and we can begin to share and connect here. So watering holes can be virtual. They can be things like a podcast. If you are a guest on a podcast, then that could be an example of a watering hole. If the listeners are your ideal clients, it can be a physical space, an event, or a conference. It can be an association. And as we'll talk about in a minute, it can be something that you specifically create. You create yourself, which I call a beacon, to gather people together. One in, I think it was about 2006. It was just less than a year after I started my blog, Escape from Cubicle Nation. I had moved to Arizona from the Bay Area, and I started my blog. I always say I had about 3 readers: my dad, my sister, and my best friend, as one does when you first start a blog. And so I was writing for a few months and hoping to get some traction. A few months into the experience, I wrote a post called An Open Letter to CEOs Across the Corporate World. And I had just run across Guy Kawasaki. If anybody knows Guy, who wrote Art of the Start, he's the chief evangelist for Canva. And I had just read about him online and thought he was so interesting and cool. And so on a whim, I sent him an email about 10 o'clock at night with that post that I had written. And I just said, I love your work. I've been following it. I thought you might enjoy this post. And he wrote me back in about 10 minutes. And he said, can you make it a top 10 list, which is his favorite format. So I furiously wrote the rest of the post. The next day, he posted it on his blog, which in 2006, for those of us that were around during those times, he really had a very popular blog. And I went massively viral. It was like this watering hole where all of a sudden, this slow plodding work that I had been doing with joy to share my blog posts, all of a sudden, when it reached that watering hole, it was a perfect connection with audience. And so sometimes that's just the beauty of having the perfect connection at the perfect time. We can't, somebody said, well, break down the 3 steps so that I can go viral. To which I say, well, it's not as easy as 3 steps. If it was, then all of us would go viral on a daily basis. But it is really thinking about, with great intention, what could be some of these watering holes that really are the best fit for you. So that's where, for each, in this example, as you have different audience segments, you could have different watering holes. You're going to be creating different types of ecosystem maps for each of these audiences. And of course, prioritizing for your time, energy, and money, which of these segments are the ones that you want to go after at which time. So that's where you can start to do some analysis. There's a lot of whittling. I use tools like Pocket sometimes. If I run across interesting people, conferences, I'll tag things in different categories. I'll begin to pay attention to certain content creators that I really love, where I notice that many of my clients also love them. I asked on Facebook the other day, what were people's favorite newsletter? And about 20 people came back with James Clear of Atomic Habits, who I know, who's an amazing writer, great book. And I thought, okay, that's a great example of like one specific partner that I can tell has a lot of synergy with my already existing audience. So you want to really start to pay attention to these things. And again, in the context of the ecosystem, think about what would be these kinds of places that would have great resources for my clients, and where there might be other people like them that I could look at. So for me, recently in this last year, these are some of the examples of the kind of partnering that I do. Of course, today I'm with y'all, which I really appreciate, where we can build this peer mentor kind of relationship. We can get to know each other here in Phoenix to really help support the growth of our business community, especially around marketing. I've done specific projects with GoDaddy and Keep, presenting at their business conferences, because of course, who are their customers? Their customers are all people who want to be growing their business and are very connected with something like my Tiny Marketing Actions approach. So doing a webinar with GoDaddy, doing a presentation with Keep is a really great way for me to go one to many. And then there are some of these meta organizations and connections. I'm a small business influencer, part of the Small Business Influencer Council for B to SMB. Any of you in the SaaS space might know about them, but they're one of the associations, in addition to the Cloud Software Association, that has about 400 different SaaS companies that serve the small business market. So when I go to, and we have in-person events, I can't move, 2 feet without bumping into the CEO of Alignable and, the CEO of LinkedIn, and people who, again, from the one-to-many perspective, are connected to thousands and sometimes millions of ideal clients and customers. The 1 million cups, we host this here in non-COVID times. This is an example of a connection across the country of other communities like us here in downtown Mesa that are doing specific work to build our local ecosystem and really to grow here our innovation district. Rebrand Cities is a partnership that I have with Hodge Flemings in Detroit and WordPress, where we collaborate in order to be building small business websites for small business owners, especially entrepreneurs of color. And then recently, I've been collaborating with Page 2, which is a Canadian publisher, where many of their authors also want to be growing and developing programs, which is one of the things that I do with them. So it's just to give you some concrete examples of, in addition just to doing things of engaging with my community in any given year, I think really specifically about what are some of these longer term partnerships that will allow me to be an important part of the ecosystem, but also to connect one to many. That's really, really important. A couple of the folks that I'm talking about in my book is Brene Brown, who is a friend who we've seen, like, where is she not? She does work with the US Army and Google and social workers, and she has her own Netflix special. Brene's a beautiful example of somebody who has really absolutely crossed the ecosystem wheel in terms of bringing her work out into many different places. And then John Legend, who I also featured in my book, Body of Work, is similar in that he does work with TED Education Series, and he's on The Voice, and he produces music, of course, and television events, and he's involved in social causes. So you can see that there are people who, I think, I'll find out more as I do interviews for the book, but are very deliberately doing this kind of ecosystem development. Obviously, in order to really begin to move out of just a couple of the pizza pie segments of the ecosystem and to really have more breadth, you need resource, and often you need team, right? That, it helps that both Brene and John have lots of platform and have resources also to begin to do that expansion. But going back to that body of work perspective, what I think is so beautiful and interesting about it is to see how many segments of the world that Brene has been able to bring this concept of shame and vulnerability, right, into people better understanding how to be better leaders in so many different sectors of society. And for John, so many areas he can have an impact. That's not always everybody's desire to have such big of an impact, but it is, I think they are really great examples of that. And I can't wait. I'm going to have data research nerds and infographic designers to be doing some plotting as we begin to look at all the different places in which they show up. And I really can't wait to see some of those visuals because it is pretty striking. So one of the questions you can ask just in your own world is, who might be this natural complement? I call it a peanut butter to your jelly. As a business coach, almost everybody I work with needs a CPA. They need an IP attorney. They need a web designer. These are natural connections where you can be thinking about who would be a person who I can just be in lockstep with all the time. I'm thinking, and I'm going to forget your name in a sec, I won't go back in the chat, but was it Mark who's getting into like wealth management and wealth planning? I could see some natural connections with real estate agents, people who might have, if your client segment, for example, are folks that do have additional resources and disposable income, then most likely they're purchasing property, right? So you like partnering with some real estate agents, maybe doing some joint kind of events together could be really powerful. Crossbeam is an example of a software company that actually has built in and really operationalized this ecosystem mapping for SaaS companies. And so that's what they do. Both can bring their customer segments in. They see where the overlaps are, and it's a specific tool that they have for creating more partnerships. And I think that's really going to be the wave of the future, where you have technology that's assisting to look at where we have these one-to-many opportunities to cross over. So the last piece I'll just say is, like Kawasaki said, we were on a panel together at South by Southwest after, the book came out, after we got to know each other for a while. And when you think about like why people would want to partner with you, somebody asked, like, how do you get the attention of influential people? Or I know a lot of folks I work with say, how can you grab the attention of partners so that they're interested in wanting to partner with you? And he said, people think I have the Midas touch, as if what I touch turns to gold. He said, I only touch gold. So your job to be the very best at what you do to create great things that people will want to be connected to provide a critical service that is absolutely essential for your collective ideal clients in order to solve their problem. That to me is what makes really, really great partners. And I think in the context of an ecosystem, that's really important. So beacons are more ways that you're sharing your point of view and your unique value, how you're letting people know who you are and what's really important to you. So it can be things like Jay Bear, which I'm still crying that he moved away and left us in the valley. I love Jay, those of you who know him. He's such a genius at really having very consistent social media, having a great example of the kinds of people who he has featured within his podcasts and within all of his social are people that absolutely are part of that peer ecosystem to support his clients who are wanting to grow. And that's a very clear way that he's created strong beacons with this content in order to attract the attention of clients who hire him to do, for him to do marketing for them. Susan Beyer and Drew McClellan, who heads AMI, they specifically create a beacon every year. They do research for marketing agencies in order to really support that particular segment. And it's a really powerful way that Susan has really dialed in to the kinds of watering holes where her ideal clients are. In the times of live events, she would present maybe 4 or 5 times a year across the country in partnership with Drew to groups of agencies, because her clients are digital marketing agencies. So it's a very specific way of both targeting your marketing efforts and creating really useful content that helps them solve their problems. And so they do a big research project every year, and they usually present at Inbound to their audience. Here at the Main Street Learning Lab, we've created a physical beacon. So these are some of our amazing leaders that we have here in non-COVID times who are running events on a continual basis. And this is an example of having a physical space where we have a place where people can come to get resources and support for really doing inclusive entrepreneur development in downtown Mesa. So just to give you some examples, it's going to be different for each person, but just think, where is that place? Where is that beacon where you're really sharing your point of view, where people can go to deeply know your work and get a sense of what a good partner that you would be? And so, the way to make those connections is often with this is our Chihuahua, Rocky. the connections you want to make are really with these little tiny marketing actions, right? Little tiny ways as you begin to know each other. Like all of you started, if you hadn't known each other before, with a little action of just connecting with each other, introducing yourself, maybe saying hi, having a little bit of a dialogue, having a follow-up message, connecting on LinkedIn after today, where there are ways that we can naturally and organically begin to build connections. And this is the part I find for some of my clients that it's really important to be clear. And actually, I see I have a typo in here, so that was a test for those of you who are editors. I'm missing an I in definition, but this is really a way that you humanly begin to build these ecosystem connections. So you could say, okay, great. These are all the associations I want to be connected with, and these are my best partners, and here are these amazing influencers. Often you can't just send them an email and right away get the connection. It's a process of slowly beginning to connect and with a lot of heart and intention and grace, slowly begin to make these connections. And then, over time, track them so that you remember who it is that you've connected with and you begin to get some forward momentum. So that is really the official end to the main presentation, to kind of give you the concept of ecosystem. And in the next, what do we have, 10 minutes, I would love to engage in some conversation about it and see if it made sense, get questions, get some different context. So I'll turn to you. Yes, I'll turn it to you to moderate our conversation.
Yes, we have a few questions that came into me privately, but please feel free to, share to everyone. Please post any questions you might have. The first question I'm going to ask, especially since we are in this pandemic, are there any specific networking methods that you would especially, would recommend today and right now, given the pandemic?
Yeah. So this will be an example of, depending on who your ideal client is and where those places might be and which which social channels are they. I know for me, for most like B2B or even B2C, but like for entrepreneurs, LinkedIn is a really, really great place to just naturally make some connections. And I think the tiny extra steps would be to really be thoughtful when you are reaching out, to not just do the generic, let me just connect with somebody and not say anything, but just to take the time where you have done some analysis beforehand, right? For example, where there's somebody who you think is really interesting and you like their work, is to note in that connection, I was so interested, to read that article that you wrote, and I really would love to connect on here because I'm doing similar research and XYZ topic. All of us have been spammed, unfortunately, with very generic kinds of LinkedIn connections, and so I think it can stand out when you're thoughtful to truly have a personalized note, because the people who you're connecting with, you want to connect to, and you've done some ecosystem analysis and you've discovered that it is something that would be a worthwhile connection. So things like that I think can be really important. What I've noticed in virtual events, as I said, tomorrow I'm speaking at Icon at Keep Infusionsoft's user conference. And so they have, as many conferences are doing now, they have a platform where you can be connecting inside that platform to make connections. I've noticed, of course, because I'm a nerd for tiny marketing actions, of the people who automatically have reached out to connect, who are connecting with me on LinkedIn with a personal message. And I just cheer in my head when I see that, because I know they're probably taking that time to be very deliberate with it. So there's a lot of pre-research, not just during COVID times, but I know whenever I go to South by Southwest, there was a lot of preparation that I would do beforehand to pay attention to who might be there, to be sending a message or an email to somebody who I might want to meet, to be following specific hashtags, and to be contributing and participating. There's a lot of what I think in general we need to do, which is just to be more deliberate about where we're spending our time, and to look for the places when we begin to have these tiny marketing actions and outreach, where we begin to see some of that connection and then can further the conversations. So those are a couple of places I think that could be helpful, just to really show up fully for virtual events, take advantage of the fact that often they are sharing connections with sponsors and speakers and fellow attendees, to do it respectfully, to be connecting with people. And then what I've seen, one of the tiny marketing actions one of my clients was doing, sometimes might be doing a virtual gathering, get to know you. Because it's awkward sometimes, we can't really network in person. You can facilitate sometimes virtual gatherings and meetups, just to have people connect. So those are a few ideas I think to do during COVID.
So you just mentioned one of the tiny marketing efforts. However, are there any others that you have found to be most effective for you?
For me personally, it is emails, believe it or not. when I look at, I gave my Guy Kawasaki example that was being brave and reaching out to send an email just to connect. The same thing happened actually for GoDaddy. I've known folks that have worked for GoDaddy through the years, but recently, before I spoke at their last user conference, I'm a customer, so I gotten an email. I saw that they were doing webinars, and I researched who was the person who was organizing them. And I said, hey, I'd be happy to do a webinar on tiny marketing actions. They connected with me. I did that. Then I ended up, going and doing something else. So to that personally is something that can be really effective. What I work with a lot working with clients are things that you can do in batches. So part of it is there are the tiny things you do on a daily basis, like maybe emails to people. I call them love letters sometimes too, just sending an email to somebody you think is amazing. Don't ask for anything in return, just express how much their work means to you as a way to make a first step. But some of the other activities you can do, you can actually do it in a batch. So maybe you're interested in getting on a number of podcasts, you could create a template that generally introduces yourself, and you can create a spreadsheet of 50 different ideal podcasts. And then when you have your 15 minutes a day or something, you could just go down and you could crack out 10 in a row, doing a tiny bit of customization. But the key is to just be very methodical, right? Where you make sure every day you're completing your tiny actions. And I'll tell you, I mean, my proof for me is in my clients. Like, it's amazing to see what a big difference it makes. It's hundreds of thousands, in some cases, millions of dollars of revenue for professional services clients that I work with, who fully embrace and implement both an ecosystem analysis, but also an approach behaviorally, a habit of tiny marketing actions. It's just like Peloton, like I said before. If you're consistent over time, it creates this longer term health. And there's this momentum that, I've seen it now so many times since working with clients on this, that I don't think is by accident.
Excellent. I know you've already touched on LinkedIn being a really good resource, and you mentioned emails, but are there any other particular networks that you like?
To me, it's completely dependent on what the business is, right? So like for each of you, for me personally, like when I think about networks that serve entrepreneurs or influencers that serve entrepreneurs, like I like doing a work backward analysis often. If there is somebody like James Clear, who wrote Atomic Habits, great book, very related to this topic if you haven't read it yet. But it's fun sometimes to deconstruct and to work backwards, where you might look at where the places, like in the case of James, where are the podcasts where he spoke, where are the events where he spoke in person when we were speaking in person. And that can be a way to identify some very specific watering holes where that you have another ecosystem partner who is very resonant with your ideal client. But given the different backgrounds all of us have on this call, and the fact that we have different audiences, one of the major points is there's not any one place, because a place that would be perfect for me could be terrible for one of you, because you may have a very different audience segment with a different problem to be solved.
Excellent. Those are all the questions that I had at this point. Feel free to unmute yourself. Don't be shy. Ask a question while we are so grateful to have Pamela with us here. So please ask any question you might have.
I'm going to shamelessly promote. We have jobs. I work for businesses worldwide, and we have jobs right now. There's a specific job right now. It's somebody that's going to work with marketing and events to market the event. And I think this would be perfect for us to find. We're a multi-level marketing company. So I think this would be perfect but anyway, so Plexus Worldwide, if you know people looking for a job, I think we're looking for content writers and all kinds of people. So but
fantastic.
I worked with Susan Bayer for a few years at Dial. So follow her on LinkedIn. She's amazing.
That's so wonderful. And that was a tiny marketing action. Did you see that for Nina? Like, right, she took
Good
the opportunity
job,
to do
Nina.
it. Yes.
Good job, Nina.
Hi, Pam.
Does anyone else have any questions? Otherwise, we'll close it up.
Hi, Pamela. This is Kurt. First of all, thank you. Great job. I'm taking notes. I know we're going to get the slides and the video and everything, but couldn't help it. I noticed on your site that you're running an 8-week course on tiny marketing actions, but it started September. Is there going to be another one after this one's done? And I have one more follow-up question on that.
Yes. Yeah, I'll most likely do it next year. My book manuscript is due March 1st. So I think I'll have to do it like early spring. But I will definitely be doing it again. Yeah.
Awesome.
What's a follow-up?
Yeah, and then one follow-up question, as far as that goes, you showed an Excel spreadsheet for tracking. I think that was for tracking tiny marketing actions. Is that your go-to tool for that? Are there other tools that you've used, tried, and either recommend or wouldn't recommend for that?
Yeah, that's really for the general planning that I'm doing for the like ecosystem mapping. So identifying within each of the ecosystem wheel segments. I've just found that spreadsheets is usually the most straightforward thing. I do use, Trello, in which sometimes I'm capturing different boards. Like when I get ready for the book launch, believe me, I'm implementing all of this for the book launch for the ecosystem tracking. So I do use sometimes more like, CRM tools for doing it. But after now we've taught probably 150 people, I think, in the last 2 sessions of Tiny Marketing Actions have gone through. And I think we've all kind of decided that like a spreadsheet can be a great first place to start, just begin to look at it, because something like HubSpot is wonderful when you really begin to like look at nurturing and bringing somebody through. It's almost like they get from that staging area of Tiny Marketing Actions into like really becoming a contact and a prospect. But if you were to just pull everything into a tool like that, it might be a little bit overkill. But it's one of the things I'm researching for the book, because you're not alone. Like, believe me, I'd love just to be able to point to the perfect tool, kind of the equivalent of what Crossbeam is, but for, that's for SaaS companies, but that for individuals.
Yeah, there used to be a tool that I liked called Gist many years ago, and
Oh, we can't hear you for some reason, Kurt.
You just were very faint.
Yeah, not sure.
I lost you, Kurt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe use the chat feature.
Yeah.
I gotta jump off.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you,
Yes.
Dan. Wonderful seeing you.
Same here.
all right. Thank you
Great.
so much.
Well, yes, thank you all so much. I have a coaching call to jump to as well. So thank you so much
Great.
for having me, and we will follow up with some additional resources for you.
Thanks. Pam. And I just
Thank
want to
you.
close out. We really appreciate it, Pam. Thank you.
My pleasure.
And, Pam gave us a lot of great takeaways. So we will be forwarding the video and the presentation to you. And then I just want to quickly, our last event of the year 2020 will be Thursday, December 12th. Ted Itima from Investis Digital, and that's formerly Vertical Measures, in case you're not familiar. The topic is Digital Marketing 2021 Strategy and the Customer Journey. And with all that's gone on in this past year, digital marketing is more important than ever. So please, we would love for you to join us. Keep an eye out on our website. You will receive emails for registration that will be up soon. But thank you again, everybody, for joining. Would like to thank our sponsors one more time. Thank you again, Taylor Wellman from Financial Potion, who will be, hosting our last event of the year. If you have any video needs, please consider calling her. And then again, I know Eileen Burrick is on the line. We'd like to thank Burrick Communication Design. She is our graphic design sponsor. If you have visual design needs, please consider calling Eileen Burrick. And we would like to thank our supporters once again. They make it possible for our board members to do what they do. And most of all, I want to thank you, everybody, for joining us. We really appreciate it. And we hope to see you on December 12th for our last 2020 event. But thank you and have a great rest of the afternoon, everyone. Bye.